All right, guys. So we have a little bit of a crisis that I have to talk to you about here. A little bit of a constitutional crisis, big issue. Um, Judges' dueling decisions put access to a key abortion drug in jeopardy nationwide. So they're talking about what is basically the abortion pill. It's like medication abortion. I'm going to butcher the name here. I've heard other people pronounce it, but for whatever reason, I struggle with this one because it hasn't stuck yet. But mifepristone, mifepristone. Yeah, I don't know. Whatever. We're gonna go with that. So anyway, here's what they say in NPR about this. Federal judges in 2 states issued contradictory decisions Friday evening that could drastically impact access to a drug used in nearly all medication abortions in the U.S. In Texas, U.S. District Judge Matthew Kacsmaryk, what? Okay, new rule. If I can't pronounce your shit, you have to change your shit. God, I hate it. We're just gonna go with U.S. District Judge Matthew ruled that the Food and Drug Administration improperly approved the abortion pill, mifepristone, more than 20 years ago. A coalition of anti-abortion rights groups called the Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine sued the FDA last year. The judge issued a nationwide injunction pausing the FDA's approval, which is set to take effect in 7 days. So, this drug has been used safely for 20 years. And now this extremist Texas court is like, we're going to go ahead and stop that. Within hours of that decision, U.S. District Judge Thomas O. Rice issued a ruling in a separate case in Washington state. That lawsuit, filed by a coalition of Democratic attorneys general in 17 states and the District of Columbia, sought to block the FDA from pulling the drug from the market. Rice's decision blocks the FDA from altering the status quo and rights as it relates to the availability of mifepristone. Washington State Attorney General Bob Ferguson told NPR on Friday that he believes the judge's ruling could make it possible for patients in those states to continue using mifepristone for abortion in the short term, even after the Texas decision takes effect. Quote, if you live in Washington State or one of the 17 states that joined Washington in our lawsuit, then the judge's ruling in our case preserves the status quo on ensuring that access to mifepristone remains available, Ferguson said. For the rest, he said, the Texas judge's ruling seriously has the potential to eliminate that access for mifepristone here in the coming days. Most abortions already are illegal in about a dozen of those states, including Texas, following last summer's Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization decision. Hours after the Texas ruling, the Justice Department appealed to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, which has a reputation for being a conservative jurisdiction. The Justice Department says it is also reviewing the decision in Washington state. President Biden said the ruling in Texas could have widespread consequences. Quote, if this ruling were to stand, then there will be virtually no prescription approved by the FDA that would be safe from these kinds of political, ideological attacks, the president said in a statement. It is the next big step toward the national ban on abortion that Republican elected officials have vowed to make law in America. He said that the administration would fight the ruling, noting the Department of Justice has already filed an appeal and will seek an immediate stay of the decision. So, and then you have the anti-abortion groups are, claiming victory. Listen to this. Mifepristone was approved by the FDA in 2000 for use in combination with a second drug, misoprostol. More than half of all abortions in the United States are done using medication as opposed to a surgical procedure, and the 2-drug combination was used for 98% of them in 2020, according to the Guttmacher Institute. So, by the way, this is one of those things where you can use it kind of earlier in the pregnancy, and so it's very useful on that front. It's not surgical abortion. It's a medication you take early on. Now, also, I should point out, when you're talking about, early on the procedure of abortion, it's less of a debatable issue even, right? Like, the later you get into pregnancy, the more you're late term in the pregnancy, that's when there's more of a debate about the ethics and the morality of it. But early on in the process, this is every civilized country has realized, like, yes, bodily autonomy. We're talking about a gamete or a zygote or a pregestation fetus. This is not the same thing as quote unquote killing a baby, as they like to say, for later on. And again, they're even trying to restrict that, which is astonishing, man. That's a colossal overreach. Major medical groups say mifepristone, which is also used in miscarriage management, that's an important point, has a well-established safety record and have been calling for relaxing restrictions on its use for years. So this isn't just something, in other words, this isn't just used for abortions. This is also used for, look, there's a fatal issue with the fetus, and the fetus is not going to make it anyway. And this is the drug that they would use basically to manage miscarriages and make the process less terrible. And this guy, this Texas judge is just in a broad way banning the drug. I need you to stop and think of the implications of this too. I mean, so you can have these federal courts can just, because of their own politics and their own ideology, can make decisions that impact the rest of the nation. And in this instance, it happens to be tied to science and medicine, where we have experts, we have people who've studied this stuff, we have people who, their entire lives have been based in this kind of science and this kind of medicine. And you could have a federal judge who's deeply ideological step in and say, yeah, I disagree. We're going to go ahead and ban this. The overreach is astonishing, man, which is why we started talking about this relatively recently, and shout out to Tom Hartman for bringing this to my attention. But there's a part of the Constitution about what's called court stripping or judicial stripping. And the idea is Congress can say, hey, the courts have no ability to rule on this. They can do legislation and then put that in the legislation, that this is not subject to any sort of court procedure, and we're court stripping on this front. We get the final say on this. This is something that has not been used, right? But it's in there. And we're at the point now, guys, where we just have judicial activist authoritarians on the right, and this is the Federalist Society, this is the right-wing project for the past 50, 60 years, where they realized, hey, the real power is with the courts, because, the way that they've been acting recently is the president or Congress can get something done, and then a court can step in and just say, we're not going to allow that. The Supreme Court with judicial review. We disagree. You're not allowed to do that constitutionally, so we're just going to slap it down. And the overreach and the authoritarianism is so extreme now that you can't just sit back and do nothing. So look, in this instance, I think what you should do is very clear and very simple. You have contradictory rulings. You have two federal court contradictory rulings. So what do you do if you're the Biden administration? You go with the interpretation of the court that you ideologically agree with, and the one that's on the side of more freedom. And that's not a crazy idea. That's actually a very simple, straightforward, and correct idea. So, look, they're overreaching. The way that the U.S. has worked for decades now is this, guys. Regular people get robbed endlessly economically, right? The billionaires and the oligarchs and the corporations run our system. But they've given us like a modicum of social freedom to almost make up for the fact that you're getting robbed economically. So that's why you've seen movement in a lot of these different states legalizing recreational marijuana. That's why for decades we had, legal abortion and things of that nature. They try to give you a little more leeway on social issues so that they continue to rob you economically. Well, now they're overreaching on social issues, and they're being incredibly authoritarian and draconian and primitive and right-wing on social issues. So, look, what happens in a country where economically you're getting robbed on a regular basis by a corrupt system, but also now they take away your social freedoms? Even going as far as to ban the abortion pill, which is used early on and is 100% safe and effective, and does not have the same kind of late-term implications as a surgical abortion in the 7th month or whatever. They're overreaching. Ignore them. These courts have gotten way too powerful. This is judicial tyranny is what this is. That is the best description for what we're looking at here. So ignore the court ruling that you disagree with, go with the one that you agree with, and you better start exercising some court stripping, because if you don't, we're going to have rule by judicial fiat from now until the end of time. And the last thing I want are some uber-religious Ivy League pricks from the Federalist Society having control of all of our lives. And that's currently the direction that we're going in. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.